All right, today we are diving into something that feels like it's straight out of science fiction, but it's very, very real. It's a completely new chapter in how we fight cancer. We're not just talking about a new drug here, we're talking about throwing out the old playbook and starting fresh. For as long as any of us can remember, we've thought about vaccines in one specific way. They're a shield, right? Something you get to protect yourself before you get sick, training your body to fight off things like the flu or measles. But what if we could flip that entire idea on its head? What if, instead of being just a defensive shield, a vaccine could be an offensive weapon? A sword forged for a battle that's already started? And that is the incredible idea behind cancer vaccines. It's not about preventing a disease you might get. It's about creating a custom-built weapon to go after the one you already have. So let's break down how this actually works. To really get this, we first need to understand that there are two totally different approaches going on, and this is where that whole shield versus sword idea really comes into focus. So on one hand, you have the shield. These are the preventative vaccines, the kind we're more familiar with. A perfect example is the HPV vaccine. It doesn't fight cancer directly, it stops the virus that causes most cervical cancers. But on the other hand, you have the sword. These are the therapeutic vaccines. You give these to patients who already have cancer, and their only job is to teach the immune system how to find and kill the tumor cells that are already there. And this is where things are getting really exciting. So, how in the world do you teach your body to fight its own cancer? Well, the answer comes from this field called immunotherapy. And the idea behind it is actually pretty genius. It's not about attacking the cancer with an outside drug. It's about waking up your body's own security team. Okay, so the core concept is really powerful. Your body has these amazing soldiers called T cells. Think of them as the special forces of your immune system. They are experts at finding and destroying invaders. Here's the problem, though. Cancer is sneaky. It's a master of disguise because it comes from our own cells, so it often fools T cells into thinking it's friendly fire. The goal of these new vaccines is basically to rip that disguise off and give your special forces a clear target. Now, as you can probably guess, there isn't just one single way to unmask the enemy. Scientists have come up with a whole playbook of different strategies to get those T cells trained up and ready to fight. Let's take a look at the main game plans. This table gives you a nice overview of the 4 big tactics. Some vaccines use specific proteins from the tumor, called antigens, to basically show the immune system what the enemy looks like. Others use whole tumor cells, either from the patient or a donor. Then there's a really clever approach using what are called dendritic cells. They're kind of like the intelligence officers of the immune system. They get loaded up with intel on the tumor and sent back in to brief the T cells. And finally, you have the genetic approach, using DNA or RNA. This gives our own cells the instructions to build the enemy proteins, which basically turns our own body into a vaccine factory. And it's that last one that is causing an absolute revolution. You've definitely heard of mRNA from the COVID vaccines, right? Well, that same incredible technology that allows for super fast development is now being aimed squarely at cancer. But here's the twist. Instead of a one-size-fits-all vaccine for a virus that's the same in everybody, this is about making a completely unique, one-of-a-kind vaccine for a single person's tumor. And the process itself is just mind-blowing. It starts with a biopsy, a small sample of the patient's tumor. Then, that sample gets genetically sequenced to find all the tiny, specific mutations that make it unique. You can think of these mutations as the tumor's fingerprints. A custom mRNA vaccine is then literally coded with the instructions for those exact fingerprints. So when that vaccine is injected, it tells the patient's cells to make harmless little pieces of those fingerprint proteins, which gives their T cells a crystal clear mugshot of the enemy. And the craziest part? This whole custom building process can happen in just a matter of weeks. And make no mistake, this isn't just a cool idea for the future. This is happening right now all across the globe. Russia has announced some really promising early results. The big players, like BioNTech and Moderna, are deep into late-stage trials for cancers like melanoma and pancreatic cancer. And over in the UK, the National Health Service is launching a massive program to get thousands of patients access to these trials. The race is well and truly on. But, and this is a really, really important but, we have to keep all this excitement grounded in reality. Some of the headlines you might see, like a 100% effective rate from some early Russian studies, were in animals. And as Dr. David Pinato from Imperial College London points out, what works in a mouse often doesn't work in a person. We have to remember, these are still the very early days. Which brings us to the final and maybe the most critical part of this story. the huge, huge challenges that are still ahead, and a totally unexpected breakthrough that might just help us get past them. First up, the reality check, money. Developing any new drug is wildly expensive. But for cancer, because it's so complex, the average cost to get just one successful drug to market is over $1 billion. Second, time. This process is incredibly slow. The journey from a scientist's first discovery in a lab to a drug you can get at a pharmacy usually takes the better part of a decade, sometimes a lot longer. And finally, the odds. They are just brutal. For every 100 cancer drugs that are promising enough to even start human trials, only about 5 of them will ever actually get approved. So the path is long, it's expensive, and it's mostly filled with failure. But then, sometimes science just gives you a gift, a clue from a place you were never even looking. And in this case, a massive clue came from the global fight against COVID-19. So check this out. This is from a recent study in the journal Nature. They looked at melanoma patients who were getting standard immunotherapy, and they found something absolutely astonishing. The patients who also happened to get a standard COVID mRNA vaccine around the time of their treatment had a much, much better outcome. Look at that jump. Their 3-year survival rate was nearly 68%, compared to just 44% for the group that didn't get the vaccine. The theory is that the COVID vaccine gave the whole immune system a powerful jolt, which kind of supercharged it to respond better to the cancer treatment. Now, that discovery is incredibly hopeful, but it doesn't solve one final massive hurdle, and that's the cost. These first-generation, highly personalized vaccines, well, they're projected to cost over $100,000 per patient. So here we are. We're entering an era where we can literally design a unique sword to fight a person's unique cancer. The science is becoming a reality. But this revolution leaves us with a profound and frankly very difficult question. As we move forward, what's going to be the greater challenge? Figuring out how to cure the disease or figuring out how we can afford the cure?